Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to our webinar tonight on the application process for the Supreme Court Summer Institute. You may or may not know that today was the first day of the October term 25 of the Supreme Court. And because we're super Supreme Court nerds here at Street Law, we like to open our applications the day that the court opens for their new term. So today applications open and the Supreme Court open. And that's why we're doing this webinar tonight. So thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. I'm sure after a long day of school, um, it's a hard time to log on to find out about what you might be doing 8 months from now. A little bit about street law, a very little bit, because if you're in this webinar, if you found this on the website, likely you already know about street law. But we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and we teach about the law and democracy. And you can see our vision and mission on this screen. If you'd like to learn more about the organization itself, you can go to streetlaw.org and learn a lot more about us. So your host tonight will be me. I'm Kathy Ruffing. I am the Senior Director of Teacher Professional Development and Curriculum at Street Law, and I'm the Director of the Supreme Court Summer Institute. I taught in Fairfax County Public Schools for 27 years, and so this is my second career, and I've been at Street Law now for 6 years. And I will introduce Emma Progar, and she can tell you a little bit more about herself.
Hi, I'm Emma Progar. I am the program manager who helps support the Supreme Court Summer Institute as well as one of our other programs at Street Law. I was also a social studies teacher before joining Street Law. So I taught both in Philadelphia and then in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, which is pretty close to DC. Not as close as Fairfax, but still pretty close. And I joined Street Law about a year and a half ago.
Okay, I forgot to say maybe the most important thing about myself, and that is that I was a participant at the Supreme Court Summer Institute in 2002, and then went on to teach for about 16 more years after that. So I'll just give a super brief introduction of the history of the Supreme Court Summer Institute. Last year was our 30th year of the Supreme Court Summer Institute. We took a year off, unfortunately, in 2020, but it's been happening consistently other than that, for the past 30 years, and this summer will be the 31st. So this is a long-standing institute, but we've evolved over time. And we will look at some present cases in the Supreme Court and some historical cases. And here you can see on your screen a couple pictures from over the years. Fun fact, when I did the Supreme Court Summer Institute, the person who gave us our introduction, because he was at the time a Supreme Court advocate, was then advocate John Roberts, and now Chief Justice John Roberts. So he was instrumental in the inception of this Supreme Court Summer Institute. A little bit about what to expect at the Supreme Court Summer Institute. One of the things that I think make this a really great professional development experience is that we share a lot of student-centered strategies, and participants actually are involved in them. They actually do the activities. So we're not going to talk about the kinds of activities you might do. You yourself will be a participant in those activities, and you can take them straight back to your classroom to get your kids really engaged. You can see one of our former participants there doing an activity about whether or not the Supreme Court should decide a case. So if they should grant certiorari. We take field trips to the Supreme Court. I have to say this always with a big asterisk because it's all at the pleasure of the court and deals with the court's calendar. But generally, we get into the court to hear decisions handed down, which is a really great moment where usually most, if not all, the justices are on the bench as they hand down decisions. Generally, these are some pretty blockbuster decisions because if you follow the court much, you know that they like to hold some of the biggest cases of the term for the very end of the year. And that's precisely when we'll be there to hear decisions. Generally, we have a reception at the court, and we also go to get a docent tour of the courtroom where someone who works at the court will tell us a lot about the history of the room itself, the courtroom itself. And then for the past several years, and hopefully again this year, we've gone to the Capitol building to see where the Supreme Court sat there, because for many years before the court got its own fancy building across the street, it met in the Capitol building in various locations. And another thing that makes the Supreme Court Summer Institute really special are the legal experts. So we have a lot of friends, and we call on them to come and share their knowledge with participants. Generally, they are very close to the cases that we're studying, or they are experts in the activities we're doing. For instance, when we do the activity on how justices are nominated and confirmed. We have people who have been in the Senate working on the confirmation period process, or in the White House working on the confirmation process. So lots of legal experts that come and work with the teachers, sort of co-teach with us, and really get involved and are very open to questions from participants, and sometimes stay in touch with participants long after um, the uh, the Summer Institute is over. So if you really want to get into detail, because we're not going to get into detail here, you can check out last year's agenda if you go to streetlaw.org/SCSI, which is probably where you found information about this webinar. So maybe you've already been there. But if not, if you go there and then click on the button for 2026, it will take you to a lot of information about the Supreme Court Summer Institute, including a link to last year's agenda. Every year the cases change, and some of the sessions will also change, just to make sure that we're talking about the things that are most relevant to you and your students. But it stays largely the same. So a lot of the agenda is going to be very similar. So if you see last year's agenda, it'll give you a good idea of what you would be doing this year. I'll just give a caution that as you look at that agenda, please notice that the days are long and busy, and sometimes entail walking. So also, as you look at that agenda, think about if it is the speed that you like to do your PD in the summer, because we take advantage of every minute that we can to make sure that we make the most of our 6 days together.
So, one question that we get quite frequently is who should apply to the Supreme Court Summer Institute? And this entire professional development is created for social studies teachers or law related elective teachers who are currently in the classroom. This can be in grades 7 through 12, but this is something that is set by our funder, so it is something that we really do have to adhere to. So if you're a secondary social studies teacher or law related teacher, you're in the right place. And we just ask that you are currently in the classroom. So a couple key dates here. Today the application opens, but you have until March 1st to actually submit the application. There is plenty of time for you to work on your responses and really go over what you want to say. So there truly is no real imminent deadline for you, but March 1st is a hard cutoff. Then between March 1st and April 1st, all applications are reviewed and decision emails are sent out by April 1st. We have made a very concerted effort to send them out before April 1st because getting a message on April Fool's Day just seems, it could go either way. So we like to get those out before April 1st, but sometimes not possible. So April 1st is the absolute last day that you would hear from us. Um, and then the registration deadline is April 15th. So if you are accepted, there's a registration deadline of April 15th, and then the first week is June 7th through 12th, and the second week is June 21st through 26th. Um, a big caution, this is something that we saw a lot last year. Don't use AI. We are asking you these questions and we want to hear your authentic answers. So we want to know what you, what you truly believe and how you're going to use the materials from the Institute in your classroom. And then also another really important thing to make sure is that the street law emails are not blocked. Occasionally, we'll have people reach out saying we didn't hear that they didn't hear from us, but typically it's because those emails are being routed to their spam or junk folders.
I was trying to type in an answer unsuccessfully, so I'm going to answer the question in the chat about being an English teacher. Yes, unfortunately, it is a requirement that you're a social studies or a law-related education or a law-related elective teacher. We make that distinction because sometimes the law-related electives fall in like a criminal justice or some kind of other department that isn't social studies. But yes, you need to be teaching one of those two types of classes, as any kind of a social studies class or a law-related elective class. Okay, continuing the tips, one of the things that is really important as we review the applications, I guess we should stop to say that this is a really competitive process. At some point I lost count today, but today's the first day the applications are open, and we could fill one of the weeks of the Institute already. We have over 30 applications, and we will get hundreds of applications, varies per year. So it is a selective process. And so you should think about your answers and be as specific as possible about your answers. And some of the questions even ask you specifically to be specific. And in that case, it's going to be really important to talk about, how you're going to use what you learn. And we tell you in the question what you learn. So we don't expect you to know what you're going to learn. It says you're going to learn about, current cases. You're going to learn about the procedures in the Supreme Court. And it gives you some specifics about what you're going to learn. And so what we would like to know is knowing what you're going to learn, how would you use that in your courses or your extracurriculars? For instance, if you are, a mock trial model judiciary moot court coach, there might be some ways that you would use what you learn here in those types of activities. How it's going to benefit your own professional development and your teaching, and then how is it going to help your school? What are the needs at your school, and how could they be met by you participating? So take your time. As Emma said before, the applications are not due until March 1st. There is no prize for being first. There's no bonus points for being first. So please take your time. If you're wondering which questions might be more important than others, a good rule of thumb, I think maybe on every application, but certainly on this one, is to notice the word limits. There are some questions that have higher word limits than others, and that's because we would really like you to go into some depth about your answers to those questions and to give us some more some deeper thought and some more specifics about the answers to those questions. Please do proofread I think goes without any kind of an explanation. And there is no possibility to reactivate last year's application. For a couple of reasons, we changed some questions on the application, but also if you applied last year and you weren't successful, it's probably helpful to start over anyway. And likely, if you're like most teachers, you have some things that have happened in the last calendar year that you would include on a new application.
So with your application, part of the requirement is that you get an administrative reference. But with this administrator reference, it does not need to be limited to an assistant or vice principal or principal. This can be somebody like a department chair or somebody in the school who knows your classroom and your teaching well. Um, Additionally, make sure that you're following up with them to make sure that they have submitted. We try to send out emails on a semi-regular basis. Probably, I think last year was twice before the applications closed, letting people know that their applications were complete. But there's no promise of when those emails are going to go out. So it's always good to follow up with them. Um, and yes, I will answer those questions. Do you want me to answer those now, Kathy? Okay. Um, so yes, choose the person who knows your classroom and what you do in your classroom well. It truly does not need to be the person who is technically overseeing you in the school hierarchy, but someone who can advocate for you. So when you are uploading your teaching assignment, this is something that you will have to do that includes your name and your schedule of courses. This can be a screenshot of your daily classes. I would not recommend sending me a screenshot of a single class. We like to see the whole list of your classes. And then if this is in PDF, JPEG, or PNG format, that is the best way to upload into the system and to make sure that your application is easily submitted and then easily viewed on our end. There have been instances that if it's not in this format, we'll have to reach out and work with you to get a resubmission of this. So, um, some of you asked about the cost. There is a $150 registration fee, and a hotel fee that is one of these two figures, but that is subject to change based on a lot of conversations with our funders. But it's $275 if you elect to stay with a roommate, or $550 to stay in a single room. You can also see that the nightly rate is $55 if you elect to stay with a roommate and $110 to stay in a single room. We also do not cover flights or travel, so that is, if you're accepted, that would be your responsibility. However, most breakfasts and lunches are covered by the Supreme Court Summer Institute, however, not all. And there are a few dinners covered as well. So we don't have those exact numbers at this moment, but I would say most breakfasts, most lunches, and some dinners.
And if you look at last year's agenda, it's going to be similar. There could be some switching of days, but it's going to be very similar to last year. You do have a chance to earn some of that money back, for sure, your registration fee and then some. And that is if you participate after the institute is over in one of these three options. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail right now, but just so you get an idea of the level of effort that it would take. You can conduct a training for other teachers. If you have a big department, it could even be in your department or in your district. Some people do apply to present at their like state social studies council for the social studies conferences, but it's pretty flexible. You can write a journal article about something that you learned at the institute, and share the information with other people. Or you can participate in what we call cycles of support, which is that you would work with me and submit your lesson plans, what you're thinking about doing. We would just correspond back and forth about what that might look like. And then you would give us some feedback about how it went in your class. So those are the three options to earn back your registration fee and then some. Okay, we would love to take questions. There is one question already in the chat, which is if we stay by ourselves in a room, can family stay with us? Yes. I would say that you'll be busy a lot of the time, and families can't participate in any of the things we do. For instance, going to hear the decisions handed down or anything like that. But if your family's coming to sort of do their own thing, yes, if you book an individual room, then your family can stay in your room. Someone asked, is there a stipend? We just talked about the stipend. So there's that. Other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. So the question now is to confirm the registration fee is non-refundable even after the successful completion of the institute. Yes, that's correct. You can earn it through the stipend, but it's not a refunded registration. It's used to pay for materials. Any opportunities for financial aid or grants? That's a great question. And the answer is not specifically through us. We don't have funding for that. But we have heard from a lot of participants that they're able to get money from their PTSA, their Parent Teacher Student Association, through law firms. And so we have had several people say that they were able to get financial. There are local bar associations. Emma, am I forgetting any of them? Those are the three I think most common.
Outside of PTSA's social studies departments, did you say that?
No.
So like social studies departments, whether that's in your school at the district or county level, I work with a lot of people who have their central office cover travel or housing or both. So sometimes it's just a matter of asking someone to see what funding's available.
There's a question. Do you think there will be an opportunity to meet with a justice? Has the Institute had luck in past years to meet with one? That is an excellent question, and one I'm sorry I don't have an answer for. I'm going to be really honest and say up until the pandemic, we had a lot of luck. It was very much the norm for us to get to meet a justice at the reception at the court. Since the pandemic, we have not had much luck. I have no idea whether or not that is the new norm, or whether that was situational. So I'm just going to be honest and say I don't know. Another question is if you refer to state content standards in your application questions, should you write out the whole standard or will readers look up the standard? I would say that it would be great if you could include that. But for sure, if you're very specific about what standard you're talking about, what state, what course, what grade level, it's probably not necessary. But if once you've given all that information, it might be just as easy to put the content of the standard. There are word limits though, so that might be something that you decide is not worth some of your word limit. That could be up to you. Do you get to choose whether or not to attend week one or week two? On the application, there's an option. I can only attend week one or want to attend week one, week two, or I could attend both weeks. So you can select that on the application. And we ask that if at some point you realize that that's no longer the case, that you would correspond with us. It would be easier than getting an offer because you do get an offer to a specific week. So when you get an offer, it says, congratulations, you've been accepted to week one. And it's not very likely, I'm going to be honest, that you can switch weeks. The only way it works to switch weeks is if there's someone in week two that we also wants to switch. And then we have had very few times in the past been able to make the switch because there are two people looking to switch into opposite weeks. But we're very firm on 30 per week, so we won't be moving weeks. So yes, you can choose whether you do one or two. What are the
Um,
hotel likes? Do you want to take that question, Emma?
I can definitely, but the one thing that I want to mention with the either session, um, very do not choose that unless you are very certain that you could attend either session. There is no like extra entry for saying that you can do either session. Because we've had a few people very similar to what Kathy was saying come back and say, oh, actually, I can't do that week. So if if you really truly can do either session, choose that as an option, but otherwise choose whichever week you have the biggest preference for. For the hotels are great. Um, we stay in a few, but they're all on Capitol Hill and they're all rated incredibly high. We had participants 2 years ago stay at the hotel that we are using for this year and got absolutely glowing reviews. So, and both Kathy and I have stayed there as well, and it's great. So, um, basic amenities, definitely. It's hard to know where you've traveled, but I think that, these are very very, very nice hotels.
Oh. And the best amenity probably is its location,
Yeah.
close to the
Mhm.
Supreme Court and close to the Georgetown University Law Center where we hold the sessions. And so walkable to both of those things, which in a city like DC is important because getting around can be, can take some time. So I think Emma answered the question, does the session you request reflect your affect your chances of acceptance? Yeah, it's not worth saying that you could come to both if you can't, because it's a poor gamble to get accepted to a week you can't attend. And you'll notice that week one is really very early. Not here, but in a separate email, we got a question from someone about like, these sessions are pretty early. Can you make them later? And the answer to that is no, because we follow the court schedule. So we want to be there the last 2 weeks we can possibly be there before the court leaves. And the week in between these 2 weeks has Juneteenth in it. And we can't be there on, it doesn't work for many reasons that I won't go into to be there on a holiday. So that's why these 2 weeks are chosen. The last week two is the last week of this term, and week one is the next to the last week that we can have a 6-day institute. Do you give preference for those who teach certain courses? Example, AP US government versus world history. No, not specifically, I will say we give preferences to people who can convince us that they're going to use the materials that they'll learn in their courses. So that's really what we give preference to. I would posit that it's probably easier to make a compelling argument for why you would use what you're going to learn at a Supreme Court Summer Institute in a government course than a world history course. But if you can convince us that you're going to use it in a world history course, then just, the fact that you teach world history in and of itself is not a detriment. Okay, well, seeing no more questions in either the chat or the Q&A, and the fact that it just turned 7:30, we're going to wrap up. But there was a question earlier that I didn't answer on purpose because it's right here, and that is, if you have any additional questions in the future, please send them to scsi@streetlaw.org. And I know that might seem very nameless, but those go to both me and Emma. So it's not nameless. You could email us individually, but this one's going to hit us both. And so that's your best bet. So absolutely open to questions from now until March 1st. And scsi@streetlaw.org is the email that you should use for that. So thank you very much for joining us after a long day at school. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate your interest in the Supreme Court Summer Institute and hope to see an application from you. If you want to get our newsletters, which maybe you already do, that's how you knew about this, please feel free to capture this URL and it will put you on a list to get our educator newsletters. Okay, great. Have a great night.